Tim Rainey, we got a crazy race today, something I think we all deserved, honestly. You'll have to excuse the mountainous, this crazy amount of Leafs jerseys in the background. This is pre-game before Game 7 of the Leafs and Panthers. So I'm joining Tim from the downtown studios with SDPN and Sport Check on the second floor. And literally outside the window, I can see the smoke guns going off. I can hear the crowd roar for Maple Leaf Square. The game is literally, Tim, probably 30 meters from where I'm recording.
That's pretty awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to do this too, Adam. I know you guys have been pretty busy with all the Maple Leaf stuff, but you got the passion going on behind you, buddy. That's
absolutely,
for sure.
Absolutely. So, I think the thing we got to start with is Max Verstappen and that unbelievable, unreal, how the hell did he do it, pass to start the race. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. He was awesome, eh? I think, Adam, obviously the pass was incredible. And I think he didn't get a great getaway compared
George
to
Russell had the best one, didn't he?
What Oscar had gotten. I think Oscar had the better start. Yeah, George was pretty good too. I was actually quite surprised how good George's start was, but I think for Max, it wasn't one of his best starts. However, Oscar actually broke earlier. He broke about 10 to 15 meters earlier than what he probably could have. And he even said that post-race in the press conference. But Max obviously noticing this immediately and taking advantage of it and getting him into turn 2 there was just remarkable because it's such a tight corner and it's really hard to pull off a pass in that section of the track and make it stick and not have the other guy kind of push you off. So it was a remarkable pass, incredible pass. But Adam, I think when we take a look at Red Bull Racing and everything that's kind of happened with them this weekend, I want you to think back to Miami, right? On a track that did not suit the Red Bull, didn't suit the conditions in Miami. You look at the temperatures of the track as well and how hot it was there. And then you look at what happened in Italy. I mean, again, starting off, track super hot. And, I honestly didn't think that Red Bull was going to have a very good race at all. Actually, I thought they were really going to struggle. And I thought McLaren was just going to run away with this thing. But the car was really well balanced for Max. I mean, that allowed him to push much harder on the compounds. And I think, Adam, that is something they haven't been able to do so far this season. And that's just such a huge point. We can expand on that.
I think we should
as well. But I just wanted to point that out before we dive deeper into this. Yeah. Has to do with upgrades, right? So they brought some updates to this car for this weekend. They upgraded the side pod extension, which is it's an idea they actually got from McLaren. They also introduced an aero part, just underneath that as well, underneath the side pod extension. And that may have given them some performance. But I think one of the big things was they, interestingly enough, I mean, they introduced at the rear of the car new brake cooling inlets and outlets. And Red Bull also, Adam, the one beating the drum of what McLaren was doing with the rear tire temperatures, the tire water, and all of a sudden, Red Bull shows up with something that was eerily similar to what McLaren is doing with their rear brake inlets and outlets to really try and keep the tire temperature down as much as possible. But this may be why they actually had a really good race pace in terms of pushing on the tire. So when Max really needed to and the tire just didn't totally degrade, it was actually there for him. So when Oscar made a push, Max was able to respond. And then later on in the race, when Lando was pushing, then Max was also again able to respond. And so that tells me that the updates that they brought have really worked. It's probably the first time they've had updates they've brought to this car that have really worked. And I think actually, Max didn't like we had said, get a great start, but just making sure he got that clean air was just so important, and making sure he executed that pass to a T was crucial, obviously. But again, I think, Adam, when we take a look at this Red Bull, I mean, it really does look like they've found some solutions for it. They've unlocked some pace for it. So I think if you're McLaren, and we can get into this, but I think if you're McLaren, you got to be a little concerned.
Well, I wondered about that, Tim, because it did sort of feel like Red Bull were tailing off. It felt like maybe we would see a McLaren 1-2 a lot of the year, kind of like what we saw with Red Bull with Perez and Verstappen in 2023. It doesn't appear that like that's going to be the case.
No, I don't think so. I honestly think that, at the beginning of the season, we were kind of like not too sure of where the pecking order was behind McLaren. And, you and I had kind of gone back and forth with Red Bull, Mercedes, maybe a little Ferrari in there at times. But just really not too sure who was going to be the team that was going to really come out and actually put a legit challenge towards McLaren. Because at the start, it was McLaren versus McLaren for the Drivers' Championship. But at the end of this race on Sunday, it's now both McLaren drivers versus Max Verstappen for this championship, because Max is right in it. And I think when we get to a track like Spain, that's going to be another track where, Max is really going to have to execute, because I think they may struggle a little bit in Monaco. But when they get to Spain, I mean, that's a track that will suit the Red Bull, I think, by the looks of things. And I think if you're McLaren, I think you probably should have made hay a little bit more in that Drivers' Championship a little earlier in the season.
Do you think that McLaren will counter with upgrades of their own that we're not expecting, or is this car mostly going to look the way it looks for the first half of the season?
I think they definitely will. I mean, when we get to Spain, I think that McLaren will look a tiny bit different, right? We've got the flexi wing clamp down coming into effect. But again, is that going to be like enough? Because it really does look like Red Bull unlocked a lot of performance from their car with just a tiny little update, right? They haven't really massively updated this car. They've tweaked it a little bit here and there. I remember I think it was Japan, it was Saudi Arabia. That's where it was, where Max got pole position. I believe it was in Saudi, but that's where they were really experimenting with setups on the Red Bull machine. And I think they've fine tuned it so much that by the time we got to Imola, they've really locked in on a setup that actually really works for them, not only in qualifying, but also in the race as well. So for McLaren in updates, they'll definitely bring something at them, but I just don't know if it'll be enough, right? Like this could be a championship now moving forward that swings back and forth. You could have momentum going from both sides of those two teams. And then we'll see what happens with Mercedes and Ferrari, and we'll get to them in a little bit. But just for Red Bull, Adam, this was the race that I think turned around their championship season.
So fair to say that Christian Horner will still be the team manager, team principal going forward. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yes, yes.
I think it's worth bringing up just because there's just been rampant rumors for no reason. Now, I think I want to skip McLaren for a second, because I think one of the other things about this race that's notable is the performance of Yuki Tsunoda. He was able to squeeze a point out of that car that, frankly, nobody else has. Like, that's the first time a secondary driver for Red Bull scored a point all year, which is unbelievable. How important is his improvement and his ability to give feedback to the team to make the car a little bit more drivable for him going to be in the next few races?
Yeah, I think it'll be crucial. I think when you introduce new components to the car, you always want to make sure that both drivers are giving similar types of feedback. So I think for Yuki in this race, I think that, like I was saying, the tire degradation just wasn't totally, 100% relevant really when it came to Red Bull. They didn't have like a huge problem with that, which was very surprising because that has been sort of their Achilles heel, where Max has been saying like, hey, just give me a car that like gets me close to McLaren and I'll take care of the rest, right? Like that's essentially what Max has been getting at. But now they've come to the track with something that looks like has really, really helped them a lot within the race, because Yuki Tsunoda coming from like a pit lane start at him to finish P10 is quite remarkable. That's a really good race from him, considering just how like not very confident he was feeling with the car over the weekend. I remember he was speaking about, look, sometimes the car feels great and then it feels horrible and then it feels great again and I can't get the pace consistent. And then he had his huge crash. And so I think for Yuki, like that's a very confident, inspired drive that he put in on Sunday in Imola. And yeah, I think when they find a way of getting the balance a little more consistent for him so he can build the confidence, I think he's consistently going to be scoring points for the team. And at some point, I think he could be helping Max with this driver's championship.
Right, and that's got to help him against McLaren, right? I think it's the fact that McLaren still has 2 drivers in the top 3 most races does factor into this. And if McLaren start to do a better job of working as a team and working competitively against other teams, because it's not that they don't play the team game, it just seems like they're not ruthless enough against other teams yet. And I don't know why. It feels like Yuki Tsunoda is going to be important in order to back some of that off.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even when like we looked at the opening lap of this race, right? Especially from Oscar, and I think he'll go back and he'll take a look at what actually happened in turn 2, turn 3, which was essentially the first turns they arrived at from off the start, and how Max got around. And I think he'll go back and he'll may think about being a little bit more aggressive with Verstappen moving forward, because honestly, I really didn't expect that from Oscar. He usually has raced Max kind of hard in the past. I think he could have raced him way harder in that corner for sure. I think he probably could have taken him off track if he wanted to and may have actually got away with it because it's at the start of a race. So I think when we take a look at Piastri and Verstappen, I actually really think that is a driver whose head you can't really get into if you're Max, where if you're Max and Lando, it's a little bit of a different story, where I don't think Lando races Max as hard as he probably should, something you and I have talked about in the past. And I think Max knows that he can race Lando hard and sort of get away with it. Where with Oscar, I think Max looks at it and he's just not too sure like how hard he can actually push Oscar and sort of get away with it.
Well, it seemed like Oscar might have been covering off George Russell, who had probably of the 3 guys the best start on the grid. Like he had a great start, and going through turn 2 and turn 3, you heard George Russell on the radio saying, "What the hell is Oscar doing?" as Max slips by. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about Oscar's positioning through there. What could he have done better, and what did he do that allowed Max to get so much speed off of that corner?
Yeah, I think, honestly, Adam, I think it's just the fact that Oscar just broke too early. It just comes down to that, right? Like, it just comes down to, like, if you carry a little bit more speed in, then technically you're probably going to have close to a collision with Max. Then again, right? Like, if you're Verstappen, you sent it. Like, he basically sent it in there, and he was just like, okay, well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and I'm going to sort it out when I get into the turn. And that's essentially what happened between the two of them. And Oscar just braking a little bit too early, and Max taking advantage of the situation. A little bit lucky as well. Like, I don't think at the start of a race is always very. You're always really sort of tap dancing your way through it. You never really know how the start of a race is ever gonna go. You're improvising the whole way through, And remember, you're improvising at like 300 kilometers an hour, so it can make things pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But I just think, Adam, that pass from Verstappen was just absolutely incredible. Incredible.
It was world class. And, even for the Verstappen haters, and there are many, this guy, it's just so undeniable what this guy can do. Like, he really truly takes over a race when he wants to. And if you give him 80% of an opponent's car or 75% of an opponent's car, he's going to be able to make up that gap, right? And then, what do they always say about Formula One? It's like 90% engineering. With him, it doesn't have to be. And that is what makes him so fantastic. The guy loves to win, clearly. And I'm excited because what this does, Tim, is it sets us up for great storylines. As much as I'm a McLaren fan and I want them to win every race, we all know what happened in 2023 when, there was like one race that Red Bull didn't win, and it was Carlos Sainz, and everybody was like, oh, wow, how about that? That's interesting and new and fresh. We need rivalries like this. Yeah. And I like the fact that Max feels very confident in racing Lando, and maybe not vice versa, but he can't get a read on Oscar Piastri because Oscar's pretty quiet and a hard guy to read, and usually can race him a little bit harder. I agree with you. I think you need to see Lando especially, but Oscar too, stand up to this guy. Lewis Hamilton really was the guy that in Max's career, really and truly on equal machinery, pushed back hard. And we saw them crash at Monza, I believe it was, when they were on top of each other like a sandwich, and Daniel Ricciardo won that race. Like, there was true bitterness, true competitive spirit. I think we're building towards something like that.
Yeah, possibly. I think though too, because I think Oscar is in that sort of same vein where I don't think he's going to be pushed around by Max, and I don't think Max is obviously going to concede, right? Because we know how he drives when he's under pressure and facing a championship showdown, right? That's just the way Verstappen is. I just found it like extremely interesting, even at the end of this one. Just Andrea Stella, he was just he couldn't believe how quick Max and the Red Bull were today. They were not expecting them to be that quick, and that's quite interesting when you hear that from someone like Andrea Stella, who he's got his finger on the pulse in terms of car performances up and down the grid, and where he can actually pick out and understand, like, okay, this team's probably going to be good here, and this team's probably going to struggle. They actually thought Red Bull was going to struggle here. And then to hear from Stella afterwards, and he was just like, he's like, I can't believe they had this much pace, and I think they've taken a step forward with their car. And then as soon as he said that, I was like, oh boy. I'm like, here we go.
I like that.
We got something. Yeah, we got something going on. So that's great. That's great for us. It's great for the fans as well. But yeah, Adam, I think this is going to be a tight championship between these two teams. I think McLaren in the race just could not do anything to chase down Verstappen. Just every time either Oscar or Lando made a push, Max was there to answer and cover it off. I don't think obviously the strategy, bringing Oscar in a little too early, I think that was an issue that McLaren will definitely have to take a look at. But again, right, like even it just wouldn't have been enough. Like it still would not have been enough, I think, to beat Max today. And then also letting Lando go by after the safety car. I know Lando was on the radio lobbying for it, but it's still, I don't even think Lando could have caught him any earlier or chased him down. I just don't think anyone had anything for Verstappen today. Just, brilliant performance and much needed from him, I think, and the team to just give themselves some confidence to know that like they're going to be able to, Red Bull's going to be able to challenge in this
now,
thing.
Looking at the standings, or at least the post-race standings here, and how it all shook out, one of the most remarkable performances is Lewis Hamilton, followed very closely by Charles Leclerc. These guys did not make Q3, which is by in any era of Ferrari unacceptable. And this is in Italy. And I know it's not Monza, but it's in Italy. It's a big deal for Ferrari to be successful at these tracks. Lewis Hamilton, I believe, was up 8 spots today. What was it about Lewis? What was it about that Ferrari? What did they do over the weekend, Tim, from Saturday to Sunday to get that kind of performance out of that car?
Yeah, it seemed like he really found something this weekend. And I said this in our post-qualifying podcast as well, where he just, even though he was shocked to be out of qualifying and didn't make it into Q3, he felt comfortable and happy in the car. Like they had actually found something that he felt had worked, even though it didn't necessarily transfer into qualifying, but it most certainly transferred into the race. So however they set the car for quali and then also for racing, it worked on the one side. It just didn't work on the other, but it's a positive move for that team forward. That's for sure, because Hamilton was super excited because he was able to move forward, like you had said, Adam, in the race and hunt down others. Plus he was doing it in a Ferrari, like you had said, in Italy as well, home race. I think for Hamilton, it was all setup driven though, right? They used on this car this weekend. And I think, like we had talked about on Thursday, you and I, where it was kind of like, I think, Lewis needed to bring the setup closer to center or closer to what Charles was doing. And sure enough, like that's what it looks like he has done, right? It does look like he's creeped over and gotten closer to what Leclerc has been doing. And then also on top of that, I think like his relationship with Riccardo Adami, who's his race engineer, is really starting to like bloom and gel. And I feel they're really starting to understand each other, and you can hear it on the radio at times as well. And I think a big part of all that is just Lewis understands the more that he is calm in the car and in stressful situations, the more Riccardo Adami stays calm in those stressful situations as well. And they can communicate better, which is super important in the races, because when you get really stressed, the other person gets stressed and you're kind of absorbing each other's stress while you're, trying to drive a friggin' race car. It's a lot. So I think that relationship has come a long way. And, hearing from Lewis, it sounds like, hey, like there's sort of more to come. So that's a positive sign, I think, if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan or even a Ferrari fan as well.
What about the Riccardo Adami fans out there? Should they be excited too?
Riccardo Adami fans as well. They should definitely be like super jacked.
Now, Charles Leclerc was not thrilled about having to concede a place to Alex Albon. Obviously, he and Albon got to it, I believe, in the same spot that Verstappen passed Piastri. And, and obviously Albon was run off the track, and Ferrari basically said, listen, you got to give that place back after Lewis Hamilton had already passed him. So that's a frustrating thing for Charles. And obviously you're in the car, you're in the moment, your testosterone's up, and there's no way for you to have like insider knowledge or even outsider knowledge of what's going on around you. You only have your very limited vision and your very limited perspective. Charles was, I think, rightly upset about the fact that he's like, well, that's just hard racing. What was your take on that? Because I felt like I can see both sides, but to me, Albon did have good placement on it.
Yeah, I think, Adam, like I said this on SportsCenter Sunday night, and I think, I honestly think Charles just got like a raw deal here, man. Like this was not a great race for him, and he had a lot of stuff that went against him. I mean, the virtual safety car that came out for Esteban Ocon literally blew a hole right through his race strategy, so that was the end of that. And then also the safety car, when it came out, like it was horrible for him because he couldn't take any tires. He didn't have any left, so he was in the position that he was in. He was stuck there, and there was nothing that he could do. He's just waiting for Alex to catch up to him and try and get by, and all that he could do was defend. I think when we start talking more about like drivers racing each other and the etiquette, just it's kind of silly. Like this was a little silly in my opinion, because like I do understand that the driver sort of racing rule book has been rewritten. But at the end of the day, when you're Alex Albon and you're going around the outside of somebody, you're still putting yourself in a very vulnerable position. Like that is not a aggressive spot to be. It's not a great spot to be when you're on the outside, and Leclerc doing the right thing and protecting obviously the inside of the corner. However, it wasn't like Alex was a half a car length ahead of Charles at the apex, or he was a full car ahead. He was pretty much almost side by side with him. And so when you're going through the corner in that way, like Charles has committed to the apex, and whatever happens on the exit in racing, man, hey, that's your problem. You're the one who's on the outside. You decided to be there. Good luck to you, right? That's usually the way it should be for me, in my opinion. And I don't like the fact that the team told him to give the position back, even though he was under investigation, because you're conceding the position as a team without Charles making that decision. And also on top of that, should have left it with the stewards. Put the pressure on them. Make them be the ones who make that decision of whether or not you guys either need to swap or you get a 5-second time penalty, whatever it is. Because at the end of the day, Adam, like, it kind of ruins the racing a bit, in my opinion. That's just the way I feel about it, because maybe I'm too old school.
Well, I think it's too, Tim. You know, if you leave it up to the stewards, then what's the penalty really going to be? It's going to be 5 seconds. I'm sure he's going to be clear of the next guy, right? He could be 5 seconds clear of Albon at that point, right? Maybe even if it's 10, and I'm not saying that he would have been, but it's one of those where you can, if the stewards make that call, you can then challenge it, right? There are ways to do that. They clearly didn't have the confidence in what happened to do that. And I wondered about that. Is that Ferrari team confidence that Fred Vasseur has been slowly building back up? It's probably just not at that level yet.
Yeah. I think even if Leclerc had have gotten that, like, let's say they let them race. Ferrari doesn't say anything, and they come in, and the FIA gives Leclerc a 5-second time penalty. Ferrari is more concerned about George Russell, who was behind, and also Carlos Sainz, and also Isaac Hadjar, and also Yuki Tsunoda, because they were all within that 5-second window of Leclerc. And so obviously, yes, that is something, but I still think you need to pull the trigger on putting the pressure on the stewards, in my opinion, with all that. But they were just trying to get as many points as they could this weekend, try and salvage what they could from a difficult weekend. I mean,
they seem to do a pretty good job of that.
That would have dropped him probably back to P10 for sure, but still, at the end of the day, yeah.
So, okay, I want to talk a little bit about.
I think Adam, like, I just think you just need to leave it in the hands of the stewards and see what happens.
But you love your hard racing. You love just a vicious rivalry, and I love that about you, Tim. Like, I remember what you said after Gasly and Ocon ran into each other at Monaco last year, or I think more specifically, Ocon dive bombed Gasly, and you were like, you know what? I probably would have done it too. People were not happy with you for saying that, but I appreciated that honesty.
Hey, there was a gap there for Ocon. Okay, there was an opening. You got to take it, man. Like, I don't care what people say. Like, you have to take it. It's there. It's an opportunity. And when you're a driver and you pull away from those opportunities, it's like Ayrton Senna said, you're no longer a racing driver.
Whoa, big words, and true. You know, Tim, it's a scientific fact that clean cars drive faster, and that's why we use Silver Wax, because it's easy. They use the highest quality chemicals. Their formulas work just as well as the really expensive stuff the pros use, but that doesn't mean that Silver Wax takes itself too seriously. Look at Tim. Tim also doesn't take himself too seriously. We like being familiar and approachable as a company, so says Silverwax, and they've been around since 1999. And by the way, proudly Canadian the entire time, making your car hassle-free. And Tim, I know that you grew up in farming areas, farming communities, and you know what it's like to pull an ATV or a boat out of a shed after a winter away. It needs cleaning on the outside, but Silverwax has things like insect remover for the inside.
Insects.
Kidding. Silverwax takes absolute care of your car. Find Silverwax products at your local Canadian Tire or at silverwax.ca, and make sure you use this promo code SDPN10 because Tim and I are going to give you 10% off your next order at checkout. Again, it's silverwax.ca, promo code SDPN at checkout to save 10% off your next order. Tim, I got to ask you about our good friends, Mercedes. Two of their client teams, three of the four client team drivers. So we're talking about Albon. We're talking about both McLarens are ahead of George Russell at the end of this race. Like literally, this is the same power unit. Why did George, who had such a great qualifying, why did he have a day where really a mediocre finish for him? He's always in the top five this season. And obviously Kimi had his issues, but I'm a little bit more concerned with George. What happened there?
Yeah, I heard from Bradley Lord, who is he's basically like their head of the comms and everything at the end of this one, and he was kind of taking over for Toto Wolff in terms of the press conference stuff, which was good because Bradley gave a lot of really good detailed information. So they had a lot of issues with rear axle overheating was their big issue. And what he means by that is obviously rear tire overheating, which is what we've been talking quite a bit about when it comes to like the Red Bull versus the McLaren and all that kind of stuff. So Mercedes started really suffering from that in this race this weekend. The gap between qualifying pace and race pace for them actually this weekend was a lot bigger. So it's a lot of information for the team that they're going to have to sift through, and they may need to change their thinking and what they do to have less of a gap when it comes to qualifying setup performance to race setup performance, because I think their early stop was due to that rear limitation with the overheating of the tire. And I think George thought in the race he thought they had like over the radio, he thought they had a broken track rod.
Okay.
But Mercedes couldn't see anything in the data that suggested that that actually was the case. They think it was due to that rear axle overheating, so tire overheating issues, and that's why just so much sliding and why George just felt so uncomfortable with the rear of the car. And that's definitely going to be something that they're going to have to look into, because I think that as a team, they do feel that they do have a competitive car. And I do think that as we get deeper into the season, and Adam, we talked about this after Miami when it was kind of like, okay, well, our team's really going to upgrade their car. And I was kind of like, well, I mean, some teams are probably not going to upgrade their car, and some teams probably will upgrade their car. I think Mercedes will be one of those teams that will upgrade their car and not pull the plug on developing this year's Mercedes, because I think they will still probably push forward with some pretty aggressive updates. But I think it was the same thing as we saw last year, where we went to Miami. We had a big update that came from McLaren. We got to Imola, and it was like a totally different sort of race. It was a total different performance from teams that we didn't expect. And the same sort of thing happened here with Aston Martin being one of them. We'll talk about them in a bit. But the same sort of thing here, where Mercedes has been competitive throughout the start of the season. They've had a dip. This is the dip that they're in, and now I think they're going to be able to turn it around. And I think you could see Mercedes starting to come back at McLaren at the top. And I also think this is where Red Bull turned things around at the same time. So I think like we aren't done like with this season. Like we haven't even scratched the surface of what these teams and cars can do. And I do see Mercedes playing a role in this championship battle at some point this season. As for Kimi Antonelli, yeah, I feel bad for Kimi because he had his like school mates and stuff were there with him on Thursday. His home race, like you had said, Adam. So a lot of pressure on his shoulders, and Mercedes, said it was something to do within the throttle pedal assembly. That is what put him out. So they noticed in the early 30 lap-ish, the throttle wasn't delivering full power, and then he lost like full throttle altogether and it wouldn't deliver any power, and so he had to park the car. So essentially that's what put Kimi Antonelli out of the race. A shame though, because this was a big weekend for him. But honestly, Adam, just a big learning weekend for him, having to deal with pressure, especially pressure from family, friends, everyone at the track there to support him, see him. It's a lot.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the Williams race after qualifying. Carlos Sainz said, "If you had told me last year that I would be at this race and we would not only have outqualified Ferrari in Italy, but," and this is the best part, "that they wouldn't even have made it to Q3, I would not have believed you." And yet here they were, and we get two guys in the top 10 again for Williams. And Tim, when we started doing this show together on SDPN, like when I used to guest host with you from time to time and that sort of thing, we would talk about, well, hey, Alex Albon got close to the top 10 that one time. Isn't that great? I can remember, George Russell, hey, we got points because it rained in qualifying and then it rained during the race and they had to cancel the race or whatever. This is a legitimate threat. 5th place and 8th place today, and Carlos Sainz his confidence seems to be really growing in the car. Let's talk about Williams as a team and what that car is now. What tracks is it going to do well at, because they are a legitimate threat for points every single weekend, it seems.
Yeah, it does. They've been so impressive, and I'm always like, well, they're always like, well, we're going to turn the taps off in terms of development, and I'm thinking, like, do you really want to do that right now? That's probably not a great idea. I'm like, this is the best start to a season that Williams has had in a decade for sure. I would say 2015. Williams had a good season. 2016, I believe they had a really solid season, and then 2017 things started to peter off for them, and then it got worse and worse and worse, and now they've started this trend where they're now coming back up towards the top again, and it's incredible. It's great for Williams. I think one of the things with Williams is the fact that Alex has been nailing every single detail and thing he needs to do in a race. And so too has Carlos Sainz as well. I mean, at one point in this race, Alex Albon was like daydreaming about, going after Oscar Piastri and, trying to chase him down at one point. And, at the same time, you have to, when I see things like that, I have to think and pinch myself. Like, there's just no way, like how a Williams going after a McLaren. So it was impressive to watch Alex on Sunday. Same too with Carlos as well. Granted, like, they're a team that's, I mean, they are so locked into 2026 that I look at it and I'm like, really? Do you really want to do that? Do you really want to just sit there and focus on 2026? I mean, it doesn't make any sense for you to do that. You should just maybe put a little bit more development in this car and let's see what happens here, because it could have been a podium today. There was a small chance. So
they're getting closer and closer, Tim. We'll see what happens. It's exciting. I do think Carlos's his confidence in that car seems to be growing too. Yeah, big time. Really does seem really comfortable with the car.
And it's funny because Miami is a different kind of track. And I remember talking to Carlos in Miami about this. And, he even said that the Miami circuit really suited their car and what their car can do. And he was shocked that they were as quick as they were. And he wasn't too sure where else the car was going to be that quick. He thought the car would be quick at maybe tracks that are similar to Miami, but not, identical. But the thing is that Imola is so different from friggin' Miami that I'm curious to see what the car is like when it gets to Spain or when it gets to Canada. Like, what's it going to be like when it arrives here? I mean, it could be they could have an incredible car here, Adam, for Canada.
That would be the coolest, right? Like, you got to feel like that's got to be, it's very classic, right? Williams being good again, and classic track like Circuit de Gilles Villeneuve. I think it's a beautiful thing.
Oh, just going back to the glory days, buddy. Just
all right. Now, one thing that I think is really fascinating is the performance of Isaac Hadjar. And obviously, thankfully, there have been no rumors of him being moved up to the big team or whatever, because they're just going to try to let this guy develop. But he did outrace Yuki Tsunoda even today. We'll talk about Liam Lawson in a second. But I think I think it's worth mentioning how great this guy has been all year long, and he's grabbed basically all the points that team has had. I mean, I know Yuki had a few. Real surprise, I think, for Red Bull. No,
huge. I don't think they were expecting this guy to be as good as Hadjar, as good as he has been. Really impressive for him to come away with points when on Thursday when you and I were talking. We literally were saying, where I was literally saying for the Racing Bulls, like, they need to upgrade the car. Like, it needs some sort of an upgrade brought to it. And both of the drivers were saying that to me when we were in Miami as well. And it still does look like it needs some upgrades. I think strategy wise, things worked out for them quite well. I think Hadjar taking his opening stint as long as he did, I thought was a smart move by the team. Just big time points for this driver and for the team as well. I don't see them peeling Hadjar away from that Racing Bull situation and putting him up into Red Bull. I think this is a driver I think this is a driver, Adam, you've got to develop. You really do need to develop the talent that this guy's got and bring him along, because I think if you're just going to take him and throw him into the Red Bull and you crash the guy's confidence, I mean, who knows how hard it could be to spend the time with him to bring it back, and then you're putting him back into a Racing Bulls to try and build the confidence up again. I think they should leave him there. I think that's a smart move. And I think he just needs that development time. He needs this year. He probably needs one more year after this year as well. And then you can start thinking about bringing him up to the big team. And then, he'd probably be a little more ready, because he does look like he's got a lot of talent. Yeah,
just needs some seasoning, right? And Yuki did 3 years, right? So that's one of those things. I think it's the smart thing to do. And as you said, Tim, many, many times, these guys, the good ones, need 3 years to really start to begin to hit their prime, which makes guys like Verstappen and Ricciardo and more recently Piastri so surprising, is when they're able to do it so quickly. And I think Isaac Hadjar, though, if Red Bull can avoid the chaos of their own decision making, this guy could be a great driver for them for a long time. And maybe he's not world beating like Max Verstappen, but he is pretty good insurance if Max decides to go after 2026.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it certainly seems. I think keep developing the guy, right? Like, then we'll see what happens. And then again, I mean, if Red Bull's able to help Max win this championship, and then also, things go well for them and their power unit for 2026, who's to say that, Max will really leave? But again, there are rumors out there that, and we have touched on this, of that possibility happening. So that's why I say, make sure you develop this guy as best you can. And I wouldn't pull the trigger on just moving your young drivers around anymore. Not right now. Let Yuki finish the season out where he's at. Let him learn and figure the car out. I think Yuki will get the grips with it. And so I would just say, just focus on that development. It's going to be important to have these guys. So don't mess with that sort of secret sauce you got there.
Liam Lawson is a guy that, for whatever reason, rumors were following him around going into this race weekend. And it's like, guys, he just got into the car. Like, we know when you're making up rumors and we know when rumors are real. He just got back into this car. He performed really well in it last year. And he needs a little bit of time to rebuild his confidence and build his confidence without preseason testing in that Racing Bull, but he did finish 14th. I think that's an improvement. I think they got to look at that as a good sign.
Yeah, I think it is to start off with when you're trying to rebuild a driver who's, it may not say that he was affected by leaving Red Bull, but I mean, come on, who wouldn't be? That's a difficult situation that that was a difficult situation he was put in. And I think it would affect pretty much any driver. And I think for Lawson, there's a good driver in there for sure. And he's definitely been working fairly hard and consistently at trying to build himself back up, understand the car and what they have. There have been a few races that have been a little, tough. Miami was that was just a tough weekend for him all around. I think this weekend went a little smoother for him. Yes, it's a P14 finish, but I think it's, it's the fact that he finished the race, got the mileage under the belt at him, that was the most important thing.
Now, one team you want to talk about that you made specific mention that you wanted to talk about before we get into some questions here is Aston Martin. And we knew going into the season, Tim, this was not going to be a great car. Adrian Newey only started in March for real. And he said, I think he did a recent interview. He said, yeah, we've got some areas of improvement within the factory. And of course he's going to say that because of course they do. They're not winning championships. So what did you want to talk about when it comes to Lance Stroll, Fernando Alonso, and Aston Martin?
Yeah, Adam, I think this was a weekend that is one of those what could have been, because they have transformed this car in the span of a weekend. Now, they'll learn more and understand more about this car once they get through Monaco and they go to Spain, and then they'll know really what this update has done for the car. But I think one of the biggest things is obviously when you go from having this state-of-the-art facility and technology and trying to understand it and get it to work and talk to each other. And I mentioned this on the post-qualifying podcast. It's the fact that so now they've got everything up and running. The focus is trying to get everything to talk to each other. This was an update that they were working on since December. That's how long they've been working on this upgrade for. And so for them, getting the new wind tunnel put online, getting that working, this was the first sort of update that was built in that wind tunnel. Getting the CFD, wind tunnel, and racetrack talking to each other is a huge step for this team. Everybody may roll their eyes and they may not care or whatever, but when we talk about this team and let's say they make some big strides for next year, in the year after as well, this is that point. This is that moment where that starts. And so for this race, I question the strategy in terms of bringing Lance in when they did. Running that medium tire for as long as he did, I really thought that they should have let Lance run with the others who hadn't pitted, because obviously Fernando was the first to pit from the two of them. And then eventually that allowed Lance to make his way up to P5, P4. And then obviously they called him to come in, and then we had the VSC, and that just ruined everything, right? That screwed the entire strategy. And that was the end of their race. Hajar doing what he was able to do also as well. really just put them well out of the points. And then we had the safety car, and it just got worse. So for them, I think the strategy side, I don't want to say failed them, but I think you've got to pay attention to, like, if you're boxing your one guy who's out, further up, that's fine. Keep an eye on what Verstappen and the McLarens are doing, and when are they boxing like Norris and all those guys, because they're the ones who like hung it out there and like risked it, right? And it paid off. Obviously, Lance was still putting in competitive lap times. Like this was a strong car for them this weekend. Like Alonso was talking about at the end of this race that the car was like, he was just mentioning how strong the car was, but on top of all that, he could follow like Norris and Russell and keep up. And at one point, Russell was slower than the Aston Martins were. And so that probably could have, if the strategy played out the way they wanted it to, could have given them P6, P7. Obviously with the VSC, gave those guys who didn't pit the advantage, obviously, right? But I mean, the positive, I think, is that both cars could have scored really good, strong points this weekend. I mean, for them, the main thing is, I think, Adam, the upgrades worked. They did get screwed by the VSC. They probably should take a look at the strategy and the way they called it for this race and make sure they keep that in the back of their minds for the next time. And we'll see how they go in Monaco, but I have a good feeling for them in this car and this update when they come to Canada, though. I think this, this could provide some excitement for for all of us Canadian.
We want a
really
Canadian driver to do well
and their drivers. Yeah.
So going into the questions here.
So I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's all good. Yeah, I was just going to say for questions.
Yes.
We got some, so I'm going to read them out. I know we're suffering from a bit of a delay, you and I, but I'm gonna read the first one. I'll let you go, and then I'll follow up. So Caden Lee asks, do you think McLaren should have told Oscar to let Lando pass as soon as possible on the restart?
Well, I'm glad that Tim answered this question a little bit earlier, because it just seemed like there was nothing they could do about Max. But I wondered that myself, Tim. So I want to turn it back over to you. Why did you feel that way? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I think one of the things I want to take away from this one is the fact that I think Adam McLaren was right in basically. I said this on SportsCenter, but strategizing their race over today's race over the long term. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is that at the moment you've got good driver harmony.
Yes.
Right? And I think during that safety car period, I mean, Norris radioing that message and really petitioning for that swap, the pit wall just not getting involved, right? Pit wall is staying out of it in a ways, and McLaren clearly letting both drivers race each other. And that's something they said they would do this year, would let them race each other this year. And I think this was one of those moments where the pit wall needed to stay out of this battle fight between the two of them. I think it was a strategic move by the team, not to tell them to swap. I think McLaren chose the bigger picture at him. I think they really did. I think they focused more on the rest of this season because they know that there will be driver unhappiness. There's going to be calls that I think this team is going to have to make sometime this season where it's going to piss some people off and it's going to tick off some drivers. And there's going to be times where the drivers may get close to each other. It could be contact, whatever. I think you don't want to upset the harmony right now when you're trying to like pull away from everybody. It just doesn't seem like a smart move. So yeah, I think McLaren was right in staying completely out of this one. Andrew asks, where do you see Williams going from here? The car looked great. Alex in 5th, Carlos in 8th. Do you think they'll be competitive in Monaco? I'll take this one because, yes, Adam, I think Williams is going to be really good in Monaco. They showed that in Miami, which is a slower track, slower type corners, street circuit, that they can be very competitive on. And I think Monaco is going to be a really good track for them as well. Adam, this one I think might be for you. What did you think of McLaren? Never mind. We already answered this one.
Yeah,
my bad. Yeah. This is from Louis. Now that we see what Max can do, how far away is Yuki from showing improvements in true pace? And then for Franco Colapinto, how do you think the team sees his performance this weekend? Franco did finish, so he finished P16. Was a tough weekend for him all around, right? I think Yuki is showing improvements for sure in true pace. That's like I had said earlier, this is the up and downness of all of it for Yuki. But Adam, for Franco, tough weekend for him, right?
Yeah, I mean, Yuki, the fact that he finished 10th, I think, is just amazing. You know, the guy had the crash. It was unbelievable. He starts from pit lane. He still gets points. I think that's improvement. You talk about improvement. That's amazing. And I think he's going to need another 5 or 6 more races. And that's unfortunate for Red Bull, but that's the position they put themselves in. Everybody asked after last season how Yuki couldn't have been promoted. They made the wrong call. Now you got to pay the piper, and you got to give Yuki time. This is not an easy car to drive, but you are seeing improvements, and I think that they should be doing backflips down the track today after what Yuki was able to pull off. Now, as far as Franco Colapinto, it's so interesting in F1 that fans so often expect instant results, and this Alpine car, people forget, isn't good. It's not a good car. It's not great. And Pierre Gasly is able to squeeze some points out of it sometimes. But that Williams car from last year that Franco was driving was objectively a fast car, Tim. It just didn't have – Logan Sargent just couldn't get a grasp on it the way that Franco stepped in and did. And you have to remember, too, Franco had years of training in the Williams system and was part of the development of that car through driver simulators and off-season testing and all of those things. He was transferred to Alpine just before the season started, and the car hasn't been good, and they've had Oliver Oakes resign, and Flavio's in there, and there's, they don't have their same power unit next year. That the team is in so much flux. To expect much more than I think what you got from Franco this weekend, I think it's a little much. I think, 5-6 races from now, you probably want to see points or close to it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at the end of the day, Flavio's kind of saying that, he could have more than 5 races. And it's like, well, hold on a second here. You said 5 races. And now all of a sudden that's changed. I'm like, okay. I think for Franco, this was a tough weekend. That crash was, you should have known the car was going that wide in qualifying. You're gonna get the grass and kick up the gravel and all that kind of stuff. And that one was a little, but yeah, getting full race distance is important for him to really, really understand the car, see what it can do. Seat time is going to be so important for him and crucial. I think finishing the Grand Prix gets you that experience. It doesn't get you to understand the full limit or limitations of the car, but it does get you the experience of knowing what the car does over the evolution of a Grand Prix, with tires wearing off, fuel burning down, car getting lighter on older tires, and that knowledge and experience will be important. It's definitely going to help him as he's moving forward for the next few races for sure. But Adam, it's like we said, these are really tough tracks to throw a guy into when he hasn't had testing in this car or a lot of experience with this car. And it's kind of just like, Ooh, like I just think he should have just left Jack in the car and let him get to summertime and make your call then. But I mean, he's in. I think Franco's in tough, man. I really do. I really think he's in tough.
A team in chaos makes chaotic decisions, Tim. Now, to wrap up the show, the top three in the standings are McLaren, Mercedes. It's 279 points. Mercedes with 147, still in second place, and Red Bull at 131. In the Drivers' Championship, Piastri still number one at 146, Norris second at 133, and Verstappen at 124. Those are the only three drivers on the grid that have eclipsed 100 points, and we have a race next flip-in weekend, my friend. So, and it's the good one. It's the glitz, it's the glamour, it's the parade, because that's all the race ultimately is. Monaco Grand Prix will be back on Thursday to tee that up. And of course, Tim, throughout the weekend, will drop a post-qualifying podcast, and then we'll be back to break it all down on Sunday night or Monday morning, depending on the schedule, frankly. So Tim, I hope you have a great week, my friend, and go Leafs go.